Hi, Brian. Welcome to the Saturday Night Podcast. I'm wondering if you can hear me speaking. I can't see you or hear you. Probably if you text on the screen, I can. Yeah, that's odd. Didn't really need a camera. Could just be audio. So you could maybe turn the camera off and try and fix the audio.
You'll have me. There you go. I'm here. Yep.
Oh, there we are. That's great. Welcome to the show, Saturday Night Podcast, going out, not live tonight, but not to worry. We have Brian Barott, magician, as a guest on the show, and tonight we're going to talk about summoning demons and angels, and whether it's worth it, what people do, why people do it, and actually it's quite interesting across the internet. I'm seeing more and more people are picking an entity, whether it's a dark Goetian spirit or a fallen angel or a watcher, and having their own little interactions with them. So I find that quite interesting. I find it interesting what people ask from them, even though they usually keep that a little bit secret. I've been reading about how they offer them whiskey and perhaps coffee, fruit, and apparently leave it there for them to, drink or eat. So it's quite interesting. And last week we had J.S. Garrett on the show, and he was talking about, obviously getting one's bodily fluids and offering them. Some people disagree with that. And also there's the sort of ethics, whether, is it a good thing? Is it against God to be speaking to these different creatures? For my own interest in it, I feel somewhat bullied in life, have somewhat had sand kicked in my face quite a lot, and though I have done some psalm magic, which was my first foray into magic, and had some response from Yahweh, whoever Yahweh might be. He helped me, so it made me then have more of an interest in magic, more of an interest in contacting gods and speaking to them directly and asking for help, because it does seem to work. But obviously I don't feel like going dark side, but some people think that Yahweh is dark side. So over to you, Brian, just to fill us in on everything.
Okay. Let's start at the beginning, really. To understand why people such as myself and Garrett, um, and also other magicians that I know, contact higher entities is quite simply, it's always been done. You've only got to go to the Bible, and you can see so many times where um, people in the Bible have sacrificed a lamb, or they've sacrificed something to talk to an angel or their God even. Yeah.
Hmm.
Okay. Sorry. Excuse me.
COVID
Anyway,
alert,
I wish.
Omicron.
Yeah, whatever. Take your pick. The the problem is that in the Old Testament there was lots and lots of sacrificing, and in the New Testament, of course, baby Jesus came along and said sacrificing is bad. I am the way and the light, etc., etc., which completely contradicted God knows how many millennia of people contacting their own God and doing sacrifice. Yeah, okay.
Did these people know why they were giving a lamb? I mean, because it's a spirit, so it can't really have like
Well,
roast dinner or
it goes back to very much what Garrett says, that essentially the
the.
currency of talking to the gods is blood,
Hmm.
realistically. So
It's a little bit hard to believe, isn't it?
no, not at all. You've only got to look at the early civilizations. So they all did blood sacrifice. It's as simple as that. Mesopotamia. You can go back to any form of sort of deity worship, and they all involve blood sacrifice.
But wasn't that so? I remember, is it in the Bible, a God or something saying, "I like the smell of the meat"? Now, where did I read that? And wasn't that to Yahweh? Isn't it like the actual meat itself?
Well, it's mainly the blood. I mean,
But how do you know that?
well, because of sort of like, experience, and also the fact that there are so many religions that have very different ways of killing the animal. Yeah, so if we look at, say, the Jewish religion, they talk about something being kosher, and then we look at the Muslim religion and they talk about something being halal, and it's essentially how the blood is let from the animal. There is a massive link between blood right and contacting the deity that you wish to contact.
So, excuse me, kosher. What is that?
Well, it's kosher. It's the way in the Jewish sect, they will not eat meat that is not kosher, and essentially it's the way the animal is killed, and also the way the animal is reared. Yeah.
And how is it killed and reared?
Well, I mean, sort of, once again, it's bloodletting. For example, like with the chicken, all the blood is let out the body, and then the chicken is killed. Then the chicken is allowed to die, and then it's cooked and clean. This is considered kosher. I mean, that's the simplest way that I can put it.
Isn't it sounds like halal? Isn't that
Well,
just
yeah, I mean the Muslim religion and Islam and Judaism. I mean, they have very, very similar roots, if not identical roots, realistically. I mean, there's been a lot of, since the 70s, there's been a lot of, serious academic work that suggests that, sort of like the Nabateans were essentially what we understand as Jewish, and quite a lot of these Nabateans opted for the Christ, the Jesus Christ mythos, or the Jesus Christ cult. So you've got realistically, you've got two races of people. I mean, they all have Abrahamic roots, yeah. So yeah, there are a lot of similarities. In fact, they are in fact the same people, and that the more that the academics are going back in history, the more they're actually understanding that quite a lot of the early Quranic verses have been taken from Judaic verses, etc., etc. So yeah, there's a lot of parallels there, to put it bluntly.
okay? And I've spoke to obviously imams about about eating in that way, and according to them, it's cleaner, it's not dirty. So I mean, they haven't said to me it's about they want Allah to have the blood part of it.
Well, the thing is this is the whole problem with the religions per se. The Christian religion turned away from blood sacrificing allegedly with the advent of Jesus Christ. However, none of this really makes any sense, because Jesus Christ, or what we understand as Jesus Christ, was a Jewish sect. And it was a Jewish sect that was kind of really quite hippie, but the other sects of Judaism were still going on. So, there would have still been sacrificing still going on. I mean, sort of, if you look at the Romans, sorry, the Romans who were at the same time as early Christianity were still sacrificing to their gods. So, but as everywhere became more and more Christianized, sorry.
It's okay. So the idea of it.
Yeah. The idea of it was slowly forgotten, because essentially it was seen as paganism.
It does
because
seem as paganism. It also seems like it's just contacting lower sort of entities. Because if you think about it, why would a creator God want,
oh, you're
something
right,
so dirty?
but now you're in a completely different kind of paradigm. Yeah, I mean, sort of, uh, it's like if you look at, say, Hinduism, and they look at the, if you like, the whole sort of like cosmos arrangement, which diversifies into sort of like Shiva and Juna, Krishna, etc., etc., etc. This is their way of explaining the universe. Yeah. However, if you then sort of like look at like the works of Blavatsky sees all gods that were worshipped under paganism, and even quite a lot of the Hindu gods, as purely spirits that belong to our realm of consciousness, which is the seven planets, and you know how we understand our environment, because of course the universe is ever expanding, and it's a vast consciousness, and many of the Hindu adepts, they try to connect with the vast consciousness, and the way they do that is through the Shiva, because the Shiva is considered to be the link between what is and what is not. But this is a completely, sort of different sort of spiritual outlook. Whereas if you then say look at followers of Kali or Durga, or sort of, or even sort of like Shiva, many of them are into sacrifice and eating dead bodies. So it's not as clear cut as you see. I mean the other thing as well is that the religions that we understand, that we were given Christianity, but Christianity has nothing to do with the West, really. It's a desert religion, whereas we had sort of like Druidism and sort of like natural witches and art forms, and and religious practices that tied in with the land.
What were the Druids doing? Were they
Well,
offering sacrifices?
Well, yeah, yeah. I mean, that Halloween or Shamain, that was one of the biggest sacrifices of the years. They would burn people in a wicker man, or they would just kill them, sort of like ordinarily by cutting their throat. I mean, the
Are we allowed to talk about this on YouTube? We
well,
should maybe disguise.
I mean, you're talking about history, aren't you? You're not
Oh,
talking
okay.
about, yeah,
Yeah, okay.
you're
Maybe
not
use
talking
disguise
about.
words. They're a bit funny these days, aren't they?
Well, I mean, if I mean the history's there. I mean, like for example, they quite often find dead bodies in bogs, and the police are called in, and when they analyse the clothes that they're wearing, etc., etc., they're they're hundreds of years old, hundreds and hundreds of years old, and these people were at some stage sacrificed to a god. So, I mean, even if they go back 500 or 600 years, that's still sort of like way into sort of, almost to now, because Christianity has only been around for 2,000 years. So 500 years ago, they were still sacrificing humans in peat bogs.
Do we
Yeah.
want to engage with gods who liked that kind of thing? It's a bit grim, isn't it?
Well, I mean, obviously, there's very little information as to what gods they were worshipping. Yeah.
Hmm.
So, I mean, like, the Christians destroyed quite a lot of the information on gods and goddesses and other deities, and they left us pretty solidly with really sort of like Jesus and the saints. And the saints were were realistically they were the old gods renamed into saints. So it's for the last sort of few hundred years, few thousand years, the 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 religious deities have been slowly eroded through duplication into Christian deities.
So who was what, like St. Jude, for instance? Who was that god?
Well, we don't know. I
Oh,
mean, we are told that it's this, and we were told that it's that. But in reality, we've only got the church to go on, and the church, realistically, have got their own axe to grind, so to speak. Yeah.
hmm.
So that I don't think you're going to get much truth out of these guys.
And so no, I agree, they're completely evil. So we're left with talking to someone like you, JS, the last year he was talking about Belial. I don't know if you caught it, and he was
Yeah, yeah.
saying about how he maybe started talking to him through a sigil, and then he came into his life and slam dunked him in a certain way and gave him, these hallucinations of being, chopped up and all this kind of stuff. And actually similar to that hallucination that Bianchi gave me, that being chopped. I've experienced that. It's not very nice.
Yeah,
Uh,
but you also experienced it with a jinn, didn't you? A jinn destroyed your body and put all your innards in jars and stuff like this.
yeah,
You
but
told me about.
that was kind of nicer. That was nicer. It was very freeing to see my mind that is constantly worrying in a jar, where I could see the red bits on it, and according to the jinn, the red bits was where I worry. And so to be without that mind, that annoying little mind, it was like really freeing, it was a
Yeah, but
nice
you were still chopped up, weren't you?
well,
Yeah, you may have found the experience fascinating, but the fact is you were still chopped up. Yeah.
yes, I suppose you're right.
So I mean that is your this is your crux. I mean, this is the problem. It's like, should you do something? Well, realistically, if we go back to sort of Crowley was always saying, "Do what thou wilt," as in, do you really, do you really want to do this? Is this really part of your spiritual development? And then, of course, that calls on what we understand, what the ancient Greeks and the Eleusinian mysteries, and finding yourself. Yeah. Okay. Socrates was always on about finding yourself, and to truly find yourself, it's understanding yourself, which of course is miles away from Christianity and sort of
Oh yeah.
any of the sort of
So we
state
do
religions.
so we just left with well, he spoke about Belial. You helped me contact Shemyaza. I had some interaction there. I was trying to speak to Belial. He said in the week I just used what JS had instructed me, and he the kind of communication I had was that he believed I was like hugely immature, and that my immaturity had eaten into my life like a disease, like cancer, and driven people away and made it chaotic. And I needed to purge it from my life, basically. And he said that he would send me the knowledge, but that I would feel much grief over, because I would see just how badly it had destroyed everything. So I only got up to that kind of point. I did have kind of like a few flashbacks of interactions with people that had involved high levels of immaturity. Um, I don't mind looking at it. I mean, is this what we have to do when we work? Sort of like going to see a psychiatrist. You get sort of, I mean, is it always like that? They sort of shrink you and point out your failings and try and, I mean, why do they do that? I mean, why is it his business, my immaturity?
Well, thing is, you know, at the end of the day, you're contacting a higher entity, yeah, and everyone's contact is completely different because essentially, you know, people are asking for different things, yeah, okay. So what you discuss with your entity is what you have proposed, you know, when you meet the entity. However, it goes much deeper than that because essentially, before you meet your entity, you have chosen the entity that you want to meet, if that makes any sense. Yeah, I mean,
Mm.
sort of. Jung looked at this with shadow work, so you've really got to work out, you know, sort of what is going on in the mind because realistically, when one is working with demons, then you know you are working with the shadow self. Yeah.
Why?
So,
Why?
well, they are denoted as you know, demons are denoted as dark, aren't they? Angels are denoted as light. Yeah. I mean, this
Right.
is the sort of like folklore with it. So, when one is working with the if you like the demon kind, depending on how you want to look at it. Are you looking at it just a kind of a basic psychology that's very, very primitive and goes back thousands and thousands of years, and this is like, if you like, another aspect of your own personality? Or are you contacting the deity? Or is there really no difference? I mean, this is the thing that you know that drove Jung round the bend. You know, he couldn't work out really what the difference was, but the but the fact is, you are working with the darker side of your personality when you are working with demon kind. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
In the same way, if you're working with like higher level beings, you are working with the higher side of your sort of consciousness, so to speak.
So,
Yeah.
so is my immaturity is that a dark side?
Well, I mean, the thing is well, it's what is maturity, what is immaturity. You know, I mean, if you're gonna, you know, if you're gonna really sort of self-examine what something is, you have to understand: is this trait good or bad for me? Yeah, and
Mm.
then you have to understand whether or not that trait was something that was used in the past, which is no longer any use to you now, yeah? Or is it something that you use now because it helps you with what you do, yeah? But the only way that you can tell whether or not a trait is either negative or positive is by the result of your own life.
Yeah,
So,
I think Belial was correct. It has, when he showed me little visions, I began to see for myself other ways that, magical thinking and shit like that, had played a massive part, and how it plays a massive part in you not looking at reality, you indulging in childish magical thinking, like, oh, this will happen because of that, and because that, and that's a sign, and all that kind of like. And then when you shrink it down, really it's the thinking of a 3-year old. And really, some of my reactions, especially around other people, can be very like a 3-year old having a tantrum, like rage, when actually they've just said something that's a bit off, that most people would let go, and I kind of then like go into a rage. So I saw all that, and I saw how it does destroy my relationships, and lead me to where I've been led. But what next then? So what do I say? Oh, like, because okay, after I'd interviewed JS and he'd been talking about him, and I kind of put it out there in meditation. I wanted to talk to him. When he finally communicated with me in another meditation, he asked me, "Why did you choose me?" And I communicated back, because I want to be like, I want to have that experience that JS had. I want to be a new person. I want to be disciplined. In the same way, I want to be a new person, not the old twatty person that ends up in a rented hovel, that ends up being talked about in the Guardian, that ends up just everyone's sort of like piss bag, really. You know, like everyone, if they want to vent or someone and wipe their ass on somebody, they will choose me and my name, and
Well, yeah,
and
I
I'm
don't
like
think
a
that's necessarily the truth. I mean,
yes, it is.
no, not at all. I mean, as I said to you before, when people give you lemons, you make lemonade, don't you?
Yeah, I hear
Yeah.
you, but I do feel a little bit of a victim. So I said all this to him, and then he came back with that he would send me visions of my immaturity, and that it had eaten into my life like a cancer, and that he would change me. So he started doing all that, and then he started showing me my sexual abuse, my childhood sexual abuse, and he showed me my father naked and said, "Why does this matter?" And I do make it a big deal, like, oh, it's stuck in my head and it's ruined me from having sexual relationships. But he kind of showed, and he said, why does it matter? That man isn't anything to you. He's not even, like blood linked in any way. And I kind of saw that, and I felt almost like I was having a part of me stripped off, like pulling off a band-aid. And then he went on about my emotional needs and why do you need that and why do you need this, and I tend to like think that I need like a kind of affection from everybody all the time, like warmth and affection and speaking to me like in a sweet way, and if they don't, I'm like, whoa, what the hell is that? And he kind of pulled that off, and it felt like a kind of a plaster being pulled off. And ever since then I'm like, yeah, I don't really need that kind of nonsense from anybody. And so it's kind of woken me up more. So I just wondered what the next step is. Do I have to go to Tesco, sorry, and get some whiskey and put it on a table for him, like Santa Claus? Is this what, is this what? It's just kind of weird, isn't it?
Well, I mean, it's that, once again, the relationship you have with your God is highly personal. I mean, sort of like you, I mean, you do as much research as possible as to what the God requires, but on top of that, the God will ask you for something else. Yeah. So, or it may say everything that you're doing is perfect. Once again, you don't really know till you make the contact with it. But the thing is what it sounds like to me is that Belial is trying to train you to be a magician, because essentially what what you have to be a magician is that you have to live in the immediate moment. There's no good living in the past, and there's no good living in the future. You have to live in the immediate moment. Now, the thing is it's very interesting about any form of abuse or any form of sort of, if you like, sort of like faulty upbringing. But like most of us can't remember anything of any sort of significance after 2 or 3 years, and maybe 4 years, and you have to be jolted to remember it. However, if we've had a bad experience, instead of living in the present, we live with the bad experience. And so that bad experience mars every part of our life. Yeah.
Hmm.
So yeah, and really that's not living. That's if you like, that's just continually replaying a bad scenario to fit into present day scenarios.
Hmm.
That's not being a magician. A magician creates the world that he wants. Where if you're living in the past, well, that's gone. You can't create that. So all you create for yourself is a hell.
Hmm.
And because you're in hell, you then sort of like look for everything that's causing the hell. But the real thing that is causing yourself, is causing the hell is yourself. I mean, this is from Hinduism. This is where, Brahma said, sort of like when he was talking to Shiva, Shiva said, what you're doing about humans. He said, well, they're not really human, are they? He said, they are gods. He said, well, what are you going to do about it? He said, well, I think I'll make it easy for them. And he said, what do you mean? And he said, I'm going to put the God inside of them. And Shiva said, well, that's the last place they'll look. And it's essentially that, that is the last place we look.
Hmm.
I mean, you see it all the time when boxers lose, when they lose boxing matches, they blame the lights, they blame the trainers, they blame this. But at the end of the day, you've lost, mate, because the guy was better than you. Yeah.
Hmm.
So, you've got to find it in yourself to win. Okay?
Yeah, I see about what you're saying, and I think with my father, because I like had some kind of weird fantasy bond with him, and he was like a pedophile, a rapist, really, I kind of get men that are like that, and I kind of hook myself onto them, and kind of have a weird symbiotic kind of bullshit relationship with them. Even, my relationship with the son and all that. Oh, Sienna Miller's bloody pregnancy. There was an editor there, thinking back, because I've been thinking about it a lot. As an editor there, because, I was a single mother at the time, I had a weird symbiotic fantasy relationship with. Every time he rang me and gave me work, and I wouldn't do the work because I didn't want to do something illegal, I would like make out that he was paying me because he was my husband. It was totally bullshit. But living in that kind of weird, immature, kiddie little way, was to do with my father, I suppose. And, the fact that it kind of stuck like a sticking plaster on me, his whole being, his sexuality, all of it. And just to feel it ripped away, it kind of left some flesh like exposed, and as it was exposed, it kind of saw everything, and it was left to mature up and to see its influence in many, many different ways in my life that made it crazy. Do you know what I mean? Because people can look at other people and say, oh, that person's mad, and they just write them off. But actually, madness should be looked at, and why are they mad? You could say to somebody, why are you mad? And let's get to the bottom of that and make you unmad, which is easy to do. And I think with just looking at that chaos and the Sienna Miller thing, and I should really have said no. The son asked you to do something illegal. You're like, well, no, shove off. They're strangers to me. But in my mind, because I was a single mother, just completely alone, I needed money. I just, made it into some weird fantasy. And it didn't matter to me that I was not doing what they asked. Because after all, this editor, Chris, was my fantasy husband, giving me money each month, to live. And that way I didn't have to face the fact I didn't have a husband. I wasn't coping in relationships. I was not able to be sexual. And I wasn't able to be sexual because whenever I would try to be, up would come my father, this like image there. And I would think, oh, I can't do this because I've been sexually abused. So, I mean, I really like so far. It's almost like free therapy, free celestial therapy. I've had therapy for years and years, but his therapy seemed to be very weird, like a bit kick-ass, and it's sort of like made me see, and I'm seeing more. You were saying that he wanted for me to be a magician. It's funny, you just reminded me, he did tell me to read books on planetary magic, to study planetary magic, to which I responded, why? And I was just more or less told just to get reading on planetary magic. So, but what would he get out of me being more magical?
Well, I don't know. You'd have to ask him. I mean, essentially, you asked him for help. Yeah, you asked him to be like somebody else. But essentially, it's like wishing for a Ferrari, isn't it? I want a Ferrari. You get the Ferrari. Well, I haven't got the money to run the Ferrari. Oh, I need money to run the Ferrari. Oh, I can't drive the Ferrari. I need another wish to drive the Ferrari. Yeah. Okay. Oh, I need somewhere to keep it. Oh, I need another wish to keep it somewhere. To keep this Ferrari somewhere. This is why essentially a lot of these, if you like, overambitious wishes don't really work, because they have no, if you like, no substance to it. So, it's like with materialization. If you're wanting to sort of become a better person, then maybe you have to understand what you are. Yeah. I
Mm,
mean, essentially, even according to the scientific establishment, we are made of stardust. Yeah.
right.
And if we are made of stardust, then why not understand what affects our consciousness within the seven planets, you know, and what 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 forces make us do this, what forces make us do that. I mean, these are serious questions that you have to ask yourself. I mean, for example, if we go right back to maybe the sort of 1700s, when you went to an apothecary, they would ask you what your star sign was, and and what influence, and this was taken as science. Yeah. Then over the years, this science has slowly died. For example, when herbs are collected, you know, there are certain times when the herbs can be selected when they're at the highest potency, and once again, this is to do with the astrological alignments and things like this. So this is just plants. So if you're a human being and you're wanting to be a better human being, then why not find out what truly influences you and how to change that influence on you so that you can become a much better person.
Oh, I see. I didn't. I guess I don't believe that planets have an influence on us.
Trust me, they have an absolutely massive influence on people. I mean, if you
All
look
that
at,
nonsense about, oh, Mars is in retrograde, calm down. I mean, come on. I can't stand it when people say that kind of shit.
well, because you don't believe it doesn't mean to say that it doesn't happen. Yeah, I mean, for example, if we look at, say, the moon, the full moon. I mean, before the advent of the pill, most women's cycles were on the cycle of the moon. Yeah,
Right.
so there's one very obvious interjection of a satellite, affecting humans. And if we take that, one stage further, the moon affects the tides. Yeah, in the same way the sun makes everything grow on the planet, or it can destroy everything on the planet as well if there's not enough water. Yeah, so within, if you want, within the visual planets, then these influence us on some level. For example, so when people see Venus on a clear night, they're always really amazed about how powerful Venus is. Yeah, it's a very bright star, a planet, or whatever you want to call it. But essentially, it still has that influence on us. And even though we've gone through Christianity and other various sort of various distractions, we still understand that Venus is the planet of love and healing. Yeah, so these things, so yeah, these, and as for Mars being associated with war, the red planet. Well, it's still very much prevalent. There are many. If you start looking at the dates and times, there are many wars that have been started when Mars has been very close to the Earth. Yeah, so I mean, there is more to it than meets the eye.
So
Realistically.
I guess I will start reading then, as he says. And where does it lead? So when I've read that, then what will happen?
Well, no, you're thinking of it in the wrong way. It's knowledge is inexhaustible, isn't it?
I see. And
You know,
what
it's
do I meanwhile have to go and do this? So I don't know why I find it so funny. I guess I do find pick the whiskey, pick the best one, and go and leave it on a
well,
table in a
I'm,
glass.
I mean, for a start, have you actually asked?
Sorry.
I mean, you're laughing. It's like, and you're probably laughing at one of the most dangerous gods you can ever laugh at.
I wasn't laughing at Belial. I was laughing at the whole scenario of the whiskey on the table. It just seems like bizarre, like Father Christmas. I mean, you're supposed to add a couple of
Yeah, yeah.
biscuits. I
But
mean, it's just like
who drinks the whiskey?
I might
Who's
have
it?
a sup of
No,
it
no. But who allegedly is the whiskey for?
for Belial, but maybe he just. I
Yeah.
mean, come on. Does he really? I mean, oh God.
Well, you
So
see, this is the problem. It's like if you go into something that you don't understand, it can be highly dangerous. For example, I have a gin and it eats sweets. Okay, so I have to leave sweets out for it.
and hang on. So okay. When you've left the sweets out, they won't vanish. So do you go along then and eat them or put them in the bin?
Well, I mean, essentially, what happens is that I leave the sweet with the gin, and when I understand it's taken all it wants from it, I then give it more sweet. Yeah, okay. If
Right.
I don't do that, it becomes aggressive.
Really?
Yeah. Like for example, there are like in the Ukraine where I live now, there is something called the brownie. It's a little creature that lives in the house. It's a form of jinn, realistically, and many old people they have the brownies on the wall. They make them themselves, and they make the little brownies, and they have them on the wall. So when the brownies come out, they won't attack the house because they can see that there's brownies here, and that they won't attack their friends. Yeah.
Hmm.
But not only that, they also leave food out for the brownies as well. This is quite common. This is quite
But
common.
this all this food doesn't disappear.
Well, what you see, we're into everything is light. Yeah, Tesla proved this. Yeah, so when you eat something, especially say vegetables, you are actually absorbing the light from the vegetable. Yeah, you're absorbing the energy, which is in the form of light. Now, these are creatures from a different dimension, a different level of consciousness. So, how do they absorb the light? Well, I don't know, but obviously, if everything is light and got light energy, and these entities can absorb that energy, then that to me that makes absolute perfect sense because we have to eat the energy to eat the food to get the light. It doesn't necessarily mean that something else cannot just absorb the energy. For example, you can go into places and it has a good energy. You can go into places and it has a bad energy.
Hmm.
In that way, we are observing the same
Oh,
energy.
I
So
see. Hmm.
so in the same way, when the whiskey is put down for the god, if that's what the god requires, then
Hmm.
essentially it is extracting the energy from the whiskey.
I see. Yeah. It's amazing then we can't extract
What do you mean? We do.
energy from,
We
do we?
do. Yeah, everything we eat, everything we drink is light.
Right.
There is, I mean, that's how we get the energy. I mean, this
So
is,
that's probably why it's a good idea not to eat meat because you're probably absorbing their pain energy when they got murdered.
possibly. I mean, I mean, but everything is light. I mean, this is why this is why we are told about calories. Calories is heat. Heat is light. Yeah.
Right.
This is how it's measured. So, sort of, it's understanding what things are, and sort of, and what your relationship is with it. And like I said, it's sort of you can go into a building and you can find a building good or you can find a building bad, and that essentially is once again is the energy that is being animated in that building.
Hmm. So,
So much as
how often is one supposed to check in with somebody if somebody is um, working with them? I mean, daily or what?
well, I mean, there is no rules. I mean, I mean, I'm lucky enough to work with some of the most powerful magicians in the world. They would never come on your show because they are all covert. They don't um, even court publicity. They don't want it. Essentially, they contact you when you're at a certain level of enlightenment. And I work with some of the highest magicians in the world, and I can tell you, it's a big thing is being humble. It really is being humble, and the other thing as well is understanding the gods that they are working with. For example, I know very experienced magicians who have pulled watches. and they have summoned the Watchers into their presence, and they always talk about the extreme fear when they do this, because essentially you're allowing an entity to come into your space, into your world, and it can be truly horrific. They talk about this in the Bible. They talk about the fear of the Lord, and that's much the same thing. And this is why you can often tell whether or not people have actually been summoning or they've just been playing with their imagination, because if you really summon, that there are quite a lot of physical telltale signs that you're actually summoning an entity. And if these are not mentioned or they're omitted, then essentially you know that the person is not really contacting who they say they are contacting. They may be doing it as a mental exercise, but realistically, when an entity comes through, trust me, that there is no two ways around it. You will really understand whether or not the entity has come through.
So how do I make sure? One second. Could you stop fiddling over near the telly, please? Please, Arthur, could you stop? Sorry. So how do I know that the communication I had last week was Belial or a different entity?
Well, I'll tell you privately, but I'm not gonna say it over the radio. But there are surefire ways of understanding whether or not you are actually dealing with an entity. Many
Well,
people
I think it
just
must
don't.
have been something because it enlightened me to a certain extent. I mean, maybe it was somebody, that just crossed over but who had wisdom, but they certainly made my consciousness, cleaned it out, gave it a spring clean, so to speak. It made me
Yeah.
aware of something that I should have always been aware of, but I wasn't. It's almost like performed a healing or something.
Well, I mean, I helped a friend a few years ago, um, and he wanted some information, and I said to him, "Well, I know this entity that you can use," and he followed what I said to the letter, and that the entity actually physically appeared in front of him, and that was really interesting because the person who I gave the information to how to do this is actually he's a doctor, he's an engineer, and he's probably the least likely person you would think that would do this. And he ended up arguing with the deity. It was quite interesting. And and because he's a very intelligent man, and he actually wrote down the communication he actually had with the deity, and it was like really fascinating. And yeah, it was. But he told me all the physical attributes that one would experience when you call an entity and it comes through physically, and everything that he told me ticked all the boxes. So essentially, I knew it was a full physical manifestation. Because that's another cop out that you hear from these people. It's like, oh God, yeah, I saw him in my mind's eye, which is great. You can do that. You can see the entity in your mind's eye, but real magicians, you don't need to see it in your mind's eye. You can pull the entity through, and you can see the entity as physically as I can see you,
But
and
I saw,
other people can as well.
yeah, I saw Bella. Well, what I imagine, well, what I think was him, did see it in my mind's eye. Yeah, I did. I did see him. I did see him in that way. I didn't see him. How could I say, well, that wasn't him or that wasn't entity when they enlightened me? They gave me something that.
Well, the thing is there are lots of if you want to understand whether or not you are dealing with Belial, then essentially you need to research that, that entity, and you need to understand that sort of what is, what is Belial, and is he the entity that you are talking to? Is it fitting what you understand Belial to be? Yeah, okay. You know, and you can only do that through research and
I
you
d-
know understanding.
Sorry. So what books is he in then? I mean, it's a entity I've really heard of before, apart from.
Well, I mean, you know, he's in very early sort of Judaic references. I mean, he was one of the original demons that was with Solomon. Yeah.
Hmm.
Okay. So you know, uh, he appears in the Dead Sea Scrolls. You know, there are many places where Belial appears. Yeah. The thing is there are scant messages like in the Book of Jubilees and stuff like this, but essentially, you know, he's he's mentioned in quite a lot of you know sort of early sort of Christian texts, but he's also you know he's also mentioned in other you know in other books on demonology as well. So you know the more background you have, and the more you know the more you understand how to call the entity, what time of the day, what incense it needs, what you know, what food, whatever what is the sacrifice you're supposed to do. You're getting a higher chance of getting the entity that you want, as opposed to the entity that somebody you know is saying that they are. You know,
But
so
if it,
and this
sorry.
comes into your planetary magic as well, you know, because obviously each entity will have a phase of a planet when it's nearer to the Earth. Yeah.
Right, and okay, so what if mine isn't Belial? Does it actually matter if it's being sweet and helpful? I mean, does it really matter? Well, not
Well, I mean,
sweet. Actually, it wasn't sweet. I would say it's far from sweet, but being enlightening me, pulling me out of the darkness. Is it? Does it matter what its name is? I personally don't really care.
well, I mean, obviously, I think that's kind of dangerous,
Oh,
you
is
know,
it?
because, well, you know, you've interviewed enough serial killers to understand if you actually don't understand the person that you are with, it could be very disastrous for you. In the same way, if you're with a trickster god and you don't understand that it's a trickster god, that can be very dangerous for you in the same way as well. So yeah, it doesn't matter who you're with, because essentially there comes a time where that trust can be betrayed. And that, you know, that's the same with people, and it's the same with entities as well.
I see. But isn't Belial the biggest, baddest? Isn't he the most powerful, biggest, baddest? You know, I mean, wouldn't that be the worst? Or
I mean, once again, you know, it's very much depends on how you are and how you contact these entities in reality. You know, for example, if you are contacting Jinn Kings, it is highly unlikely you will get a Jinn King, but you will get one of his commissionaries. Yeah, okay.
Mhm.
That's a guarantee. You'll get one of the commissionaries, you'll get one of his advisors or whatever, and you will speak to that. And then when you've built up a relationship with the advisor or the you know sort of commissionary to the king, eventually you get to the stage where you are dealing with the king. Yeah.
Mhm.
But this does not happen overnight. You know, for example, if you I work with some very very high sahir, yeah, and they actually have jinn that are thousands and thousands of years old, which have been handed down from generation to generation to generation, and these jinn work for the tribe, um, and through them having a very high level jinn, they can then talk to other high level jinns, yeah, you know, from different tribes. If the tribes are compatible, because you know that's another thing as well, is jinn are always warring, so you may want to contact a jinn from another tribe and find out that it's not really happy with the jinn that you're dealing with at the moment. So it's you know, but this boils down to once again understanding you know sort of like the element, understanding the star sign, understanding the numerology, everything. You have to understand everything to realize whether or not the entity that you're dealing with is, part and parcel of what you're expecting,
Hmm.
so to speak.
It is difficult though, even I mean, because surely the cleverest jinn can hoodwink any human. I mean, won't it know that the human will go off and research Belial, but doesn't the jinn know all about that kind of thing? I
Well,
mean,
yeah, but I mean, this is why sort of like the real Sahir, the Sufi Sahir, yeah, they work with jinn that they actually know the identity of, yeah,
uh
and then they work with its tribe. They very, very rarely will go to another tribe because of the fact that you don't really know what you're getting, and this is why the sort of like there are very, very few jinn practitioners, because hardly any of them have got the ancestral linkage. There are a lot of tribes in Africa which work with jinn, and they have jinns that are like thousands and thousands and thousands of years old. Whereas, like, people who sort of like maybe have some kind of tenuous connection with jinn don't really have the, if you like, the credibility because they don't own the real jinn. If that makes any sense? Yeah.
but we've all reincarnated, haven't we? So we don't know what we were up to in previous lives.
Yeah, but even so, you still got to get, you've still got to be. One would presume if you are reincarnated, then you would be reincarnated back into a family that is with jinn, yeah, so to speak. Whereas, or like say for example, if you are a reincarnated Buddha, then you would probably, sort of be drawn to that kind of Buddhist lifestyle or Hindu lifestyle, yeah. Sort of but once again, it doesn't, it's you have to when you're working with high level demonology, etc., etc. You really have to come from a place where people have worked with these entities for quite a long time, such as J.S. Garrett and people like that, because in that way you've got a much better chance of guaranteeing access to the demon that you want to access,
Hmm.
or God. Yeah.
Yeah, all I'm saying is it's quite easy for jinn to. I mean, how do we know Belial isn't a jinn?
Well, I mean, once again, it's very dependent on the research. I mean, Belial is with Solomon in the beginning, and he he appears in Quranic verses, but um, the sort of how accurate are the Quranic verses, we don't know. This is another thing as well. I mean, there's quite a lot coming out now that the Quranic verses are actually taken, quite heavily from sort of Greek mythology and Judaic mythology. So it's once again it's very, very difficult. But all you can do is try your hardest to get the material and to get as much information as you possibly can, and then you have a much better chance of summoning the entity that you want to summon.
Hmm. Yeah, it's all okay. Well, thank you for coming on. I know we're drawing to an end time-wise right now. Well, that was interesting. Yeah, it's very like going into a maze, and then
The only thing I would say is if you're working with a powerful entity like Belial, then essentially whatever it tells you to do, you do, because if you don't, then essentially you're breaking pacts, and if you're breaking pacts, then you are sort of like throwing yourself in front of a bus.
What does that mean?
So
What's
if
a
it tells you to read so and so, then you read so and so. If it tells you to sort of like look at this kind of magic, then you look at this kind of magic. I mean, sort of. you do what it says. If you don't want to do what it says, then you dismiss it and say, look, thanks very much, but I can't keep this discipline. And then everybody wins. Otherwise, you end up putting yourself in the place where you could end up hurt.
Oh, in what way?
Well, because you're breaking the pact, aren't you?
Oh, what? And then it comes after you?
Well, it's sort of like it's like for like. If you break a pact that it considers important, then of course it will break something that you consider important.
Right.
This is why it's not a joke. This is why it's like.
Well, I didn't take it as a joke. I was laughing at the whiskey. That's all, not just the aspect. Just find it.
But this is the point. Sort of like it's humility and.
Well, that
and
wasn't
sort
being big-headed. I do have a
of,
humble life. My God, I live in a bloody garret, don't I? How could I not be humble at my age when I'm in a barn? How could I not be
but the thing
humble?
is if you're dealing with an entity and it likes this, and it wants that, then essentially, it's only when you've built up rapport, then you can ask, why do you like this certain beverage, etc.,
Yes, but
etc.
I don't know that. I haven't personally asked it. I read online. I read in a group,
Yeah, but
Facebook
okay,
group.
okay, like you're working with a god, yes?
I don't know. Well, apparently
Well,
not.
well, no,
Well,
you don't. Let's presume you're working with a god, then essentially it will arrange things to come into your life that are beneficial for your relationship with it.
right.
Yeah. So essentially, if you found this information, then essentially, it's like ushered that information towards you.
Oh,
Yeah.
I see.
I mean, it's like when I'm working with a certain jinn, I get lots and lots of information that even sort of seasoned masters, uh, I mean, ask me where I get the information from, and I have to tell them, well, I got it from the jinn. The jinn led me towards this book. I found this incantation and said, well, we thought it was lost.
Mm.
So yeah, I mean, this is roughly how it works. This is why, when you're working with higher entities, that you have to understand what is their voice and what is your voice. Know thyself,
Mm,
so to
mm.
speak. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I didn't. What it told me, I didn't have any knowledge of. So I do. I mean, I'm grateful for that. It made me alter my frame of thinking, my way of thinking. I don't want to be that person anymore.
Well,
Um,
yeah. That's the first step about being, a magician. Is essentially you start to alter the world that you want, not the one that you're given. Yeah.
yes, exactly. I mean, looking at YouTube now, I put in the word Belial and a load of rubbish about gaming comes up. So what would one put in? I mean, the search bar. Would you
Well,
put
you,
in?
you you live in London, yeah?
Uh-huh.
What's the British Library doing nowadays?
Oh, I see.
Sort of like, when I was in England, I spent 99.9% of my time in the libraries, looking at information that I wanted. Then, if I couldn't find the information in the libraries, I would then go around the antique bookshops and try and find the information there. Sort of like, being an occultist is incredibly difficult because it is 99.9% researching and maybe a few percent actually doing. Because,
Here, here it has Belial, the king of evil.
well, I mean, this is written by Christians. They're not going to say, "Oh, worship Belial is really cool," are they? They're going to
No.
say, "No, they want, you've got to stay with baby Jesus." But like I said, you're in London. You've got access to the British Library. You've got access to some amazing occult shops there. Yeah,
Yes, there is actually. You're right.
yeah. Essentially, that's where you start looking. I mean, if you're really clever, you go in the occult shops, and if the books are too expensive, you then try and find them if you can find them online somewhere.
Yes, yes, I do that. Yeah, because they're about 50 quid and all that. I mean,
Oh yeah, and the rest, and the rest.
yeah.
So, like,
Okay. Well,
So if
thank
you
you
think,
for coming. Pardon, what were you going to say?
if you think that, sort of like working with an entity is going to be easy, it's not. You need to do a lot of research, a
Okay.
lot. Okay? Yeah.
Yeah, well, I didn't intend to start on this path. It was you that introduced me to the whole idea of it. I didn't have the idea. You implanted that.
I think I don't think you can sort of blame me for that. To put it bluntly, sort of like you're either a vegetarian or a meat eater, aren't you? Yeah. If you say to a vegetarian, "Would you like to eat meat?" they would say no. If you say to a meat eater, "Would you like to be vegetarian?" they'll say no. So if you say something, "Would you like to do this?" then it has to be inside you to want to do it.
Oh yeah, I'm sure it was there. I don't think I would have got there by myself, but yeah, I'm sure it was there. Yeah, I always had an interest, for sure. I was just scared. I was brought up a strict Catholic, you know. I was going to be a nun. I lived at a convent for a while with my aunt. I used to go round there, and so I was really close to the clergy. So I was buried in the Catholic religion. I still, go to the church, and so it's difficult for me. It's going completely against them, isn't it? It's going against all their um, little teachings.
Well, it all depends if you understand the Catholic Mass or not, isn't it?
Yes, no, I hear you all that drinking. Yeah, I always thought that was really weird. But a lot of the priests that are doing that transubstantiation, they're not doing it, so it doesn't really get you anywhere. I mean, some of the only one priest that I came across, Father Michael Fuel, who's now in Wales, he was a really powerful priest, and you could really literally feel the energy and feel the change in the sherry, when you were drinking it, you could feel he'd imbued some kind of energy, historical energy. I could literally taste it. I don't know what he changed the sherry into. Maybe it was Jesus' blood, but you could literally really taste it, But most priests don't have much power, they don't have much occult power.
Well, it's
Um,
just a business, isn't it? It's a business. It's like McDonald's. It's just sort of like a kind of religious McDonald's, isn't it? Realistically, you know. Realistically, of their congregation, maybe 3% might actually be interested in some kind of religious enlightenment. So, hence they don't push it.
Well, these days the church, certainly a church I go to, is full of Indian people. It's weird, actually. I found that weird, because they should be interested in Shiva, and yet there they are interested in.
Well, that was due to the British and the what do you call it, the Portuguese. The British and the Portuguese. Obviously, they wanted people to control, so you give them the subservient Jesus who does everything and get rid of the Shiva and the Brahmas and the Anjunas and the Krishnas because they're not quite so subservient,
Yeah,
realistically.
I've noticed that. Yeah, I've noticed that. That's what I don't. That's what's made me want to break out that subservient, because you just end up getting trampled in. I mean, it's just really bad, isn't it? And it makes you realize that that has been brought about to make us subservient.
You've only got to read, was it, sort of, if a Roman asks you to carry his shield and sword, always walk the extra mile. I mean, what's that about? I mean, that's just pure
Yeah.
subservience.
I was very into subservience and the Jesus way. It's really nice. It's a sweet way of being. But people always think other people that are Christians and, people that invite you around their house because we're a Christian, we don't know you, but come and eat with us. You always kind of look at them askance and think, really? And you kind of feel that they're doing it not really to be nice and kind, where some people are like that. It's just to kind of like to tell themselves, oh, I'm being a good Christian now, and it just doesn't ring true. It doesn't seem to come from the heart.
Yeah, it's very. I mean, it's very interesting. I mean, so when I was in Goa, there's a Jewish couple there that have about 5 or 6 children, and they literally open their house for any Jewish person who was in Goa at the time, and they feed them and they look after them, and they'll even wash their clothes for them and stuff like this, and they ask for nothing. That one really opened my eyes. So they're out there. There are some very very nice people out there, and there's some people who are very in tune with themselves and the universal energies and their gods and stuff like that. And then there's some other people who are quite wicked. So that's life, I'm afraid.
Yes. Anyway, well, thank you
Okay.
for coming on the show, and I want to dedicate the show to JD, who very kindly has been helping me get some cards together and a little sign for my car. And if anybody wants a great designer for that kind of thing, her name is JD Graham, and she's on Facebook, and she's a designer, and she's brilliant. So
Cool.
yeah, I'm just gonna devote the show to her. And thank you for coming on, Brian. It has been interesting and enlightening as always.
See you later then. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Night, sorry. Okay.
Yes. And
See you
thank
then.
you, listeners, for listening, and catch you next week. Have a good week.
Bye.
Bye.